TorahCafe.com.
Another story from, what are the odds? From the Times. This was a couple of weeks ago, and this is about an attorney's right to speak. I'm quoting here from the Times story. Sean Conway was steamed at a Fort Lauderdale judge. So he did what millions of angry people do these days. He blogged about her, saying she was a, quote, evil, unfair witch. But Mr. Conway is a lawyer, and unlike millions of other online hotheads, he found himself hauled up before the Florida bar, which in April issued a reprimand and a fine. Now, it seems to me this is a guy expressing himself on that most democratic of forums, the internet. What's wrong with that, Judge?
I'm gonna go last on this one.
All right.
How much does he value his career? Look, I think that, in my opening remarks I talked about ethics issues are extremely contextual in nature. And yes, we all do have freedom of speech, and all of us are, or some of us anyway, are involved in organizations or in issues where, by virtue of that affiliation, we have agreed to circumscribe in some measure what we might say. And I think in that case, that's a close one. I mean, I think he should be able to vent his opinions about the judge. But it also seems to me that the way he did it was somehow over a line that's difficult to define.
It was witch with a W. You understand that?
There's a word he could have used with a B that would have been worse.
Yeah.
But
what would be an appropriate forum then?
An appropriate forum?
Yeah, you said that this was the wrong way to do it, that he could in another forum, but like what?
I mean, the forum available in New Jersey is you can file a complaint against the judge for inappropriate demeanor on the bench, and that's something that the ACJC deals with all the time. In fact, probably that's the single most common complaint that we deal with, and usually involving municipal court, where the caseloads are very high and tempers become short, and judges, are people, and outbursts happen. But that's the forum that the lawyer in New Jersey is open to use.
I think that there's an additional factor beyond the forum. Professions, all professions, the rabbinate, the medical profession, impose upon people a duty of civility. And it's reasonable to require that a person express himself civilly, politely about others as a condition of membership to the bar or to the rabbinate or to any other, or as a journalist. And that it seems to me that it's not the question of where he voiced it. It's that the words that he used were intemperate and impolite, and the kinds of words that you could reasonably expect one professional not to voice about another in a public forum of any type. And that I would have said the same result would have been reached if, instead of writing these words on a blog, he had to just pick a newspaper, taken out an ad in the New York Times saying these things about the judge. It's not the fact that he blogged rather than he took out an ad that caused these matters. It's the words that he said were not the kinds of words that one professional is supposed to say about another professional in a public setting. And that these intemperate words produce discipline problems, reasonably so. And I think that notions of civility are things that we somehow have lost track of. It seems to me that a reasonable structure of society says that if you have questions about the competence of a judge, there has to be a forum for voicing these, and not just a place, but a manner. And that every profession has people who are doing a job that they shouldn't be doing, and there has to be a process for weeding out bad apples, bad lawyers, bad apples, bad doctors, bad rabbis. Every profession has them. But a blog using very harsh, hyperbolistic words is ill-suitable to any profession. I'd seek to remove somebody from the rabbinate who said this about the rabbi. Don't ever do that. Judge, please.
The system that we know as practicing lawyers and judges is fragile. it depends upon a certain tolerance for each other as practitioners, for the court, from the court, to hold it all up. I'm reminded, and it's an imperfect analogy, but the dynamic is the same. I'm reminded of something that a very good warden talked about, which is how does a group of 200 people keep order in a prison of 1,500 people? And it's all by communication. It's all by the perception that's given by the way the governing professionals deal with each other and deal with the people there who don't want to be there and who contain people who might be very difficult to control. The control comes from the communication. All right, our control of the justice system, of the creation of justice, of the appearance of justice, of fairly dealing with some very, very difficult and highly emotional and clashes that really have no solution, is to have a functioning dynamic. And I think perhaps the Florida Bar's decision could come from the idea we've got to hold this thing up. We just can't let this fissure create itself and be tolerated, because once that happens, it's so swift that the whole, as I said, fragile thing starts falling apart. And we don't want that to happen. We can't get the job done. And the clients don't want that. A client doesn't want to know how dumb the judge was. A client wants to believe that when that courtroom opened its doors and the client's case was heard, it was in a place where justice is going to happen.
So if the same lawyer were sitting around with his friends at dinner and they were talking about how things went in court today, and he said the same thing at the dinner table, as I understand, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I believe it's in the Constitution we have the right to gripe about our boss. I believe Jefferson put that in there. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that certainly half the people in this room have said harsh things about people they've had to deal with at some point. Is that not what it is to be human? So
yeah.
we're not trying to suppress that in any way.
No.
But it's
fun.
Well, I think I've learned something tonight. But so it's the very public nature of it. That in fact, would you go further if this site were password protected and only accessible to like this guy's friends? That would be okay.
Is there such a thing as a password
Yeah,
protect?
there is.
Well, no, I know there are, but
my blog, randysswell.com. It's just me, and well, all right, it's just me. But
it would seem to me that that's the kind of question that the facts very much determine. Is it password protected for his 11,000 best friends,
Yeah.
or his 3 best friends? It seems to me that we all recognize that when you come home after having lost, and over dinner you turn to your spouse and you say something terrible about the judge, that's probably protected. Okay? On the other hand, when that exact same conversation takes place over dinner at a CLE in front of the 300 closest lawyers you know, that's probably not protected. And there's a line somewhere in between A and B that reasonable people might differ in the details. But a public attack on a person's integrity, whether they're a judge or another lawyer, is something that certainly, this is not the right way to express it. If you feel that the judge behaved improperly, you say that, and you can stand up and say that in public. You can stand up and say, my case reached the wrong result because here I have a videotape of the judge taking a bribe from the other side. Here's the videotape. Watch it. There's nothing wrong with that. And indeed, there's something right with that. But that isn't what this lawyer did either.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. I was surprised, actually, to read. The ACLU took up this guy's case, which surprised me. And the court affirmed the disciplinary agreement, and it cost Conway $1,200. And this article, which was great, it went on, now what I'm going to say doesn't sound so great, but it described a series of lawyers who lost their jobs doing similar things. And it mostly seems to be an internet problem. And in my line of work, I see that kind of incivility online. And the kind of email I get that I would never have gotten in a letter pre-internet, or no one would say this to your face, no one would say it on the phone. I wondered if does this affect you all in your work, or is this still just remote from your day-to-day jobs? That the online incivility, I think this guy did this I speculate that he might not have done this in any other setting, but online seems to invite this.
I was a synagogue rabbi for 15 years while a law professor, and I occasionally would read emails congregants sent me from the pulpit. And once you do that once, people learn to send you only the most civil of emails.
So this is a transparency argument.
But yes, people have this tendency to say something in email that you could not imagine a civilized person saying to their rabbi, or standing up after a sermon and saying. But, people have to learn that there's an element of civility in email, and when the first sentence in an email begins with the "Are you a moron?" You've probably overstepped your relationship with your synagogue rabbi and your lawyer as well.
Well, they put it as a question.
And I read it from the pulpit one Saturday morning and answered it.